Greetings, journeymen, journeywomen, splunkers, dunkers, titanite chunkers. Don't ask how that rhyme has to do with anything because I don't know either. As you all know, I recently hosted a 12-hour stream where I completed Steel Soul from start to finish. That's right, 0 deaths, 100%. Okay. Okay, all right. Sorry guys, I'll be back in a second. Oh, goddamn. Okay. So after 100%ing Steel Soul mode live in front of hundreds of patrons like the hedonistic attention whore that I am, I've decided to update an older video of mine, a short guide that attempts to guide you through Steel Soul, keyword being attempt, because the entire video is based off a misleading premise at best and a flat out bullshit one at worst. So let's fix that. Hopefully. Here's a list of things you need to know for 100%. A lot of what makes the Steel Hard achievement difficult is that it's hard to know what does and doesn't add to your overall completion percentage. You can actually take percentages from other DLC related content to compensate for areas in the vanilla game. There's a progress total of 112% if you count the DLCs, meaning you technically only have to beat 88% of the base game. 6% from the Grim Troop, which includes Grim's banishment ending, 1% for fighting the Hive Knight, 1 for finding the God Tuner, and 1 extra percent per Pantheon, excluding the final one. Thank God. You don't need to complete the Hunter's Journal, you don't need to kill the Radiants, and if you're borrowing percentages from the DLC, you can even get out of doing the 3rd Colosseum trial or getting all 2400 Essence. Steel Soul is all about choosing battles. If you can find a way around it, do it. And speaking of choosing your battles, if you don't need to fight a boss, don't fight the boss. Just don't fight them. If you feel like you lack the upgrades or the charms to put down a boss as quickly as possible, there's really no shame in putting them off for a few more fights. Against bosses that inflict double damage, you can also wait until you have an odd number of maximum health, so you can afford to take an extra hit without healing. Having 6 and affording to take 3 hits versus having 7 and affording to take 4. This is why I'm almost always seen fighting bosses like in Rage Guardian or Traitor Lord with no less than 7 masks. Some bosses you don't even have to fight at all until much later. If the Mantis Lords are giving you trouble, no one ever really said you have to get the Mantis Claw and kill the Lords in one pass through. Like, that's not a rule you have to follow or anything. If you don't think you can handle the fight, just grab the claw and haul ass to the city. You can technically get a full mask of health before you even leave the crossroads, although doing this requires you to defeat the Malek extremely early, so maybe not a good idea, but it's still possible to get 3. You can free all 5 grubs, including this one here, if you use the downward pogo technique on one of the Vengeflies. Also, it's possible to get the Channeled Nail before a lot of the game's main bosses. Buy the Lantern from Sly and cross the Crystal Peak to access the Resting Grounds, earning yourself the Dream Nail much earlier than normal. From there, just get 300 Essence, get a Pale Ore, and call it a day. Upgrading early is important because the less time bosses stay alive, the less of a chance they have to hit you. If that sounded condescending, it wasn't the intent, but that really is the winning strategy. Can't hit you if they aren't alive. So yeah, upgrade your shit as early as you can. There's never just one way to get to anywhere you want to go in the kingdom. Plan out your routes and have an outline for what you want to do and where you want to go, because the more time you spend roaming around and being confused and not knowing where the hell you're going, the more you're increasing the likelihood of you dying to something stupid along the way. So whenever you leave a bench or a safe area, it's best to actually know what you're going to do and where you're going to go. Don't just walk around looking for shit to do. This isn't your kitchen, this is Hallow Nest. Write out a small list of 3 or 4 things you'd like to accomplish in the next hour or so, and then go forth and actually do those things. It'll keep your playthrough streamlined, it's much easier to keep track of stuff, and it'll keep the pressure as minimal as possible. Keep an extra save you've already completed on standby, specifically for practicing bosses and harder platforming segments. I like to do this instead of going all the way to the junk pit and unlocking the god home, because if you've used up all your simple keys from the vanilla game, unlocking the god home also requires the vanquishing of the pale lurker. And fuck that bitch. Just keep an extra non-Steel Soul save on standby so you can either practice bosses in their vanilla environments, or save it for practicing harder platforming challenges like the Crystallized Mound or getting the Fog Canyon Charm Notch. Just run through the gauntlet a few times and practice the movements, then boot up your Steel Soul save and do it for real with a little more confidence. If you want essence, don't waste your time with, hey, listen to this shit, this is important. Do not waste time with warrior graves. They're annoying, and almost all of them rely on gimmicky, cancerous, RNG-related projectile bullet hell attacks that can potentially end your run in one of the most embarrassing ways imaginable. Go after dream boss variants of regular bosses instead. Dying to bosses like Tyrant, Champion, Lost Kin, GPZ, and Defender don't officially count as deaths, since they're all, you know, in a dream. Defeating Tyrant, Kin, and Champion totals out to 1,000 essence, which is enough for a Pale Lore upgrade, a charm, and a vessel fragment. Throw in GPZ and the White Defender, and it totals all out to 1,600, effectively giving you all the upgrades from the Seer without ever being in actual danger of ending your run. You're only 200 essence away from the White Palace, and that can just be farmed from Whispering Roots. So yeah, no problem there. Use fragile charms. Use them and never unequip them. If you feel like you need an extra 2 masks of health, you march your white ass right to the Leg Eater's quarters, snatch up that fragile heart, and you show that C-tier lifeblood charm the fucking door. You are not allowed to die in Steel Soul anyway, so there is no reason you should be using a shittier charm over the vastly superior fragile variants. Their one main drawback, being the act of dying, is completely negated due to the permadeath feature, meaning you can slap these babies on and not have to worry about ever breaking them, because if you do, then you're well, I mean, you suck is what I'm trying to say. Fragile Strength, easily the best of the 3 in my opinion, makes pretty much everything in the early game an absolute cinch. It's a 50% increase to your base nail damage, and I've went on ahead and jotted down all the number values for the nail and how Fragile Strength affects it. You'll notice I underlined the last item here, and if you know anything about how middle school teachers grade papers, you'll know that an underlined bit of text means what I'm about to say is pretty fucking important, and you need to spit your gum out and listen. 32 nail damage from a fully upgraded nail and Fragile Strength, meaning the following enemies will die in 1 hit. I'm not gonna say all these, but I'll just flash them up on screen for like 2 seconds. Here you go. So this is something that I can't ignore. A lot of runs out there have been ended due to very stupid deaths that shouldn't have happened. Getting cocky, etc. No Eyes, Marmu, even the lasers from the Crystal Guardian have some degree of RNG to them. Everything from NKG's Fire Spawner to the bounce physics of Ogrim's giant shitballs. The long and short of it is, a certain degree of luck is honestly necessary for you to succeed. Not a large amount. It's not even close to the most important thing, realistically, being a proper routine and knowing what the fuck you're doing. But that doesn't mean the orange beams from the Enraged Guardian won't organize themselves in a way that laser fucks your face every now and then. Make sure you're familiar with every way in which you can get screwed over, and consciously move to make sure you are never in that position. Pay attention to how you use certain movement abilities, avoid the corners of screens when the boss is winding up a projectile attack, unless the boss is doing some dipshit AoE like this one, and mostly you should be okay. Rule of thumb: if they've got it on sale, snatch that shit up like Black Friday. Get Gathering Swarm and Fragile Greed as early as possible so you can make some good headway on collecting Geo early game and buying out all the vendors. You can get a total of 4 Mask Shards and 2 Vessel Fragments just from Sly alone. Buy as many trinkets, pins, and goodies as you can, and make sure to shake down Salubra for all she's worth. You can also trade in Rancid Eggs for Geo when in Steel Soul mode by visiting where Gigi used to be, and although you probably knew that already, a lot of players don't consider doing this to be worth the Geo or the time. I'm here to tell you it totally is, and you totally shouldn't sleep on it, because in the early game, anything that gives you Geo is a good thing. Be mindful of your DD. That's not your designated driver, young vessel. That's the old 1-2 double damage haymaker you get from being on the receiving end of a boss's trademark fuck you sideways attack. But that's not the only place it happens. No, this can technically happen in platforming as well. Sometimes when an enemy hits you, the game decides to place a thorn stalk somewhere in your immediate vicinity. This leads to the force of the hit you just took, propelling you backwards and super efficiently careening your knight into a pool of fuck you juice where the second damage hit will be calculated. Whenever you're doing platforming, you really should keep this in mind and exercise caution. Some endgame areas require much more precise platforming, and so there are certain enemies that have the potential to knock you off balance into a spiky vine or some shit. I'm saying this because this is permadeath here, folks. There's no shame in quitting out when you're down to 2 or 3 health. Just remember that. Sometimes equipping a certain combination of charms will yield visual effects exclusive to those charms, Shape of Un probably being the most obvious example. But some charm interactions can also result in some pretty insane tactical bonuses that accentuate the charm's base effects. I've listed a few examples here to get you started. Bosses that are easily cheesable should be taken advantage of with a liberal amount of cheese. Shape of Un lets you duck under certain attacks like the Mantis Lord's Spear Lunge or Grimm's Fire Bat attack. Use Abyss Shriek on Nosk when he passes over you as you're hugging one of the corners. If you don't need to heal, charge up a Nail Art when bosses like Hornet or Broken Vessel show signs of being staggered for massive DPS. Fire a Shade Soul in the direction a boss is moving so it hits twice. Abuse Desolate Dive's invincibility window if your Shadow Dash won't reach Harge in time to avoid the Radiance's Light Pillar Beam attack thing. Drop the Chandelier on a blue dude's dipshit head. Yodel into Grimm's asshole when he's charging his fire pillars. If a boss is exploitable in any way, you should be exploiting it. I mean, sure, you could best the Radiance using split-second reactions, movement strategies, and deep knowledge of how the controls work, but you're at the end of the game and you are probably exhausted as shit, so here's what you do. If you're going for the true ending and you want an easy-ish Radiant skill, my preferred loadout has always been Pride, Shaman Stone, and Soul Eater, with a Grub Song thrown in if you got the 11th notch from Grimm. And since this is a 100% run you're doing, you don't really have a reason to not do that. Don't heal whatsoever for the final phase of THK because your health gets replenished between the two fights anyways. Focus on hoarding all the soul you're able to so you can enter the Radiance fight ready for some spell casting. As soon as she spawns in, start tossing Fus Rodaz right up her ass and don't stop. Although this charm loadout works really well for the Radiance, it won't serve you nearly as well against a boss where you collect no soul, such as Champion or Collector, or bosses that spend a lot of time moving around like the Soul Master or the Oblobbles. Okay, so if you're doing a 100% run, you're probably doing this anyway, but even if you're not, don't be lazy on this one. Delicate Flower Quest is not that big of a deal. Just pop a Dream Gate next to Zemur, clear out all the enemies on the way without sitting on a bench, and then teleport back to receive the flower. Knowing where everything kinda is honestly over half the battle. Focus on which shards and fragments are the easiest to obtain currently, and then kinda work your way up to the ones that have some tighter security. The last few shards I usually go for are the Grey Mourner quest, the one behind the wall in the Hive, the Enraged Guardian, and the 1500 essence required to get a shard from the Seer. The last 3 vessel fragments I usually hunt down are the one above the Durandus in the Green Path, the Garpede platforming in Deep Nest, and the Stag Nest fragment. You can get all the Mask Shards and Vessel fragments first, and then tackle the second Colosseum trial for that Pale Ore. The difference between Coiled and Pure Nail doesn't sound like that much, but it's an extra 4 damage per hit, which really adds up against bosses with large health pools. Don't sleep on the upgrades. Take your time, get them all, and then trigger the end game. This isn't a speed run, just take it slow. This last tip might seem a little unorthodox since it's in the God Home, but if you don't want to fight the Pale Lurker, because, as aforementioned, fuck that bitch, you can just open up an existing save. Practice God Home bosses on Radiant difficulty. No, I'm not kidding, and I'll tell you why I think this is a good practice to follow. A lot of the difficulty behind Steel Soul comes from its risk factor. It's an incredibly high stakes, high pressure game mode where death is permanent and save files are unsalvageable after a loss. And because of this, it's extremely easy to kind of get inside your own head. One simple mistake can very easily snowball into an unfortunate death just because you let the pressure get to you. And the simplest way around that mental setback is to just not put yourself in that position. If it sounds like practicing against Radiant level bosses is overkill, well, it is. It is overkill. That's kind of the point. Steel Soul runs aren't usually ended because you weren't good enough for a boss. They'll end because you got cocky and didn't take the time to really think about what you were doing. Practicing against Radiant level bosses in the God Home teaches you impulse control and, honestly, ability management more than anything. You'll learn more about a boss's moveset and how to react accordingly to each attack. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying beat the whole goddamn hall before you attempt a Steel Soul run. I'm only saying you should spend an hour or so fighting Radiant bosses. Hell, even if you can't win, just try it. Because what matters here is you're teaching yourself control. You really start learning how to fight that impulse to use your Shadow Dash on something stupid and then get hit by an attack you could have otherwise evaded. And my dude, let's be honest, if you can clear Absrad without getting hit, then shit, you probably aren't even watching this video right now. So yeah, there you go. I'm done. I don't have anything else. You can leave now. No, fuck you. You don't get an outro. Why? Well, no reason. I'm just lazy. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? Just let me be lazy. This song is a bop. I'm feeling it. I don't know what kind of tune Gil's gonna add to this end card, but I trust his tastes. So I'm gonna just assume the song you're hearing right now is a good one. Seriously though, the video's over.